Hello, my name is Kevin L. Jackson of Digital Transformers and author of Click to Transform. As we see more communication service providers going online with 5G, we also hear about 5G's potential and what it can deliver to both industry and society. Today, we'll be learning about how this new technology is transforming the entire telco industry with Monica Zethzon, Head of Solution Area Packet Core at Ericsson. Welcome, Monica.
Thank you, Kevin. Great to be here.
With over 80 live 5G networks deployed and 130 signed contracts, Ericsson certainly seems to know a lot about the core network. Can you please explain the journey that these operators will experience in this transition?
Mm. Yeah, it's true. We do have, the I would say the largest experience right now in the industry of the 5G networks in general and 5G core as well.
Mhm.
And there are of course a lot of things that a service provider would need to consider when embarking on the 5G journey. Maybe one way to describe it is if I take two different dimensions, the vertical dimension and the horizontal dimension. So since this is being developed as, from Ericsson 5G core, it's a fully cloud native core, which means, you now have container network functions. The first question a lot of service provider will ask, what is going to be the infrastructure that I will run these new network functions on? And some will actually take what we have, the cloud native containerized functions and still deploy it within virtual machines, more or less leveraging the infrastructure that they already have for 4G, because they might have capacity, they have the competence. It's an easier way to introduce the new technology. But we have others who now really want to go take full advantage of the fact that it is cloud native and want to do the deployment on a bare metal type of infrastructure. So we see both options in the market, and from Ericsson we do support both. And then if I talk more about the horizontal dimension, I mean, here you have both the end-to-end perspective from what you need to think of from the device, the radio access, the core, the whole orchestration, the BSS. So in that whole domain, there's also a lot of thinking around what's the right basically path for the introduction of 5G. But maybe even more so, I would say it's also the interworking with 4G or 3G for that matter as well, right? Because very few, well, I would say no carrier would have a full NR coverage day one. So you would rely on that your end users will move between the different radio accesses. So what we're doing then in the core network, there's a lot of functionality that's needed here in order to make sure that you have a good and seamless handover of your service as you transition between the different coverage areas. So for example, if it's a voice call or video, whatever the service might be, there should be no interruption to you as an end user when you're using the service. So these are also, I would say, elements that are part of really careful planning when you introduce 5G as well, how to actually make the end user service be the one that they would expect.
Wow, you really set that up well, this complex view with those two axes. What should people consider before embarking on this journey? What are the real new business opportunities that you can see on the horizon?
Yeah, I think, if we talk about, the horizon, here and now, it's a lot about getting these fundamentals in place. But the other one, I like to think of it as a bit as industrialized matchmaking, right? Because you do have, you have an enterprise who has a certain need, and you have the service provider who has now this fantastic capability in the core network. But you need to find, how do you actually get the tie between the enterprise to leverage this capability? So I would say we see a lot of examples now, of these different actors in the ecosystem coming together. I can take the example, there's like a construction company,
Right.
which might be leaning on another company to do field maintenance that has software, on field maintenance on some of their equipment that the construction company needs, right? And
Right.
in this field maintenance, the software for this, of course, if they could run this very close to the construction site, they could really, leverage the benefit of having a low latency and a high capacity. So, for example, with an AR type of application. So here you would have like the enterprise who could benefit now from an enhanced use case from the developer of the software specific to the field maintenance, and then you have the service provider providing the connectivity at the bottom. But I think the next horizon is how do you go from these being one-offs with these three parties, but more or less, create more of a marketplace, both with the right business model as well as the technology, to support all of these coming together. And here, like you mentioned, the things like network exposure is a key fundamental that we need to have in the network. But then also how to really elevate this, as I said, to an industrialized way of matchmaking. I think that's the next horizon, from my perspective, in 5G.
Well, it sounds like the communication service providers really have to know the business models of their customers. But on another area, I also understand that Ericsson is continuously investing in enhancing their portfolio. Most recently, the Ericsson Packet Core Firewall and the 5G Core Policy Studio. What do your customers see as your portfolio strengths?
I would say probably as the number one would still be the fundamentals of that. It is cloud native and it's agnostic to the underlying infrastructure. Right. I think this gives the confidence in that it's future-proof and it's also flexible enough, right? Then I would say, secondly, the fact that we have this end-to-end portfolio. So, which also makes it possible for us, already in our development, we can do pretty, significant, I would say, testing in terms of these more advanced features that I talked about. How do you actually get these to work end-to-end? How can you try robustness and resilience type of features on a network level? I think this is highly appreciated. Thirdly, I would say, the fundamental for the Ericsson offering in 5G Core is our dual mode 5G Core. And this is called dual mode because you can actually support, the legacy accesses like 4G, 3G, and 5G out of the same deployment. And I think this is appreciated as, giving a very flexible approach to how to introduce 5G into your network. And then maybe lastly, I think the examples you gave are, great to also see. We're constantly looking to how to improve further, right? How can you enhance, the offering? And I think you mentioned, the Packet Core Firewall, which is all about, increasing the security in the network, and the 5G Core Policy Studio, which is all about simplifying how you manage all the policies that you would need to set in the network in order to really, get the full service end to end. So I would say those were probably maybe the four things that I would highlight.
Wow, with such a broad portfolio, you really are setting the trend in the industry. So if you're leading the industry, where's the industry going, and what new features and developments can we expect to see in the 5G core?
I think we should expect to see a lot, right? However, I would say this year, I think we'll be a lot of seeing the launch of the 5G standalone networks. You might have recently heard and seen the announcement from Vodafone Germany now launching Europe's largest standalone network, and we're very proud to be part of that. And you should expect to see more of those type of announcements and more networks going live, throughout the year. So I personally be very excited to see, what will be the pickup of traffic into these networks? What kind of use cases will we see that, the market, embraces and carry and take up on? But then, of course, now when that fundamental kind of the 5G core network is there, it becomes all about these new type of opportunities where I think we should see more deployment of where network slicing becomes more commonplace. The network exposure will, play a bigger part, dynamic orchestration in order to manage all of this. So I think there's a lot, left to come in the whole area of 5G, but all of this, trying to look at functionality that in the end can really, give the greatest value for the enterprise and the consumers that's going to, use the network.
Wow, I could see some really awesome use cases in manufacturing and transportation with that. But, I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap up with that, Monica. So thank you for giving us that insight into the 5G core and Ericsson's impressive telecommunications infrastructure portfolio. So thank you all for spending the time with us. See you next time on Intelligent World.